welcome to another episode of Women Lifting Women. I'm really excited to be joined today by Alice, and I'm going to ask by starting for Alice to introduce herself. So Alice, tell me all about you.
So I'm Alice Anson. I am Digital Media Director at Nectar360. So basically look after all of our retail media proposition. I've been with the business for 5.5 years, kind of in various different roles. And prior to that, kind of a variety of roles across e-commerce in the travel and the lifestyle space.
That's amazing. I'll probably have another new question for you. Well, retail media is really... I don't know, kind of a buzzword for this year. I think the last 2 years have been really in for retail media. It's just exciting. And that switch of roles is always interesting to see how people kind of like evolve in their career. I've been asked that question before, so I would love to hear more about your experience. But to kick off, I'm going to ask my favorite question, as often in the industry, or often we talk about being a woman as a very negative thing or a very difficult thing to be, which is why I always start with this single question of asking the flip side of what is the advantage of being a woman in this industry? What is your superpower?
I think the advantage of being a woman in the industry that I work in is actually a lot of the senior people within retail media are all men. So it's really nice because it means that actually I'm a different voice within the room, a different opinion. And I think more broadly being a woman and the advantages of working in advertising is I think we're much more able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And I think that's really important when you're doing a job that relies on kind of appealing to a wide group of customers. We can kind of take all of our biases, if you like, out of the picture and be like, what would it be like to be them? And I think that's definitely for me one of the strengths that women have.
So empathy, the ability to empathize and kind of like imagine if I was in their shoes, what would I care about? That's a really valid point, as I've done a lot when I think about our cohorts and what is the motivation behind it, what will move people, and trying to kind of get into their head. I think that's really valid. Maybe because this is how we've survived. I don't know. There's something about women trying to read a room or empathize and kind of figure out what's going on there. I think probably is connected to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like emotional intelligence traditionally has been looked on as a really negative thing. And I think actually by some of the amazing women that we've got in the industry today, we've kind of really pushed that forward to be like, actually, this is our superpower as a group of, cis women. This is what we can bring to the table. And this is where we make the change.
I can definitely agree. And I've heard that being the only one in the room, like the advantage of standing out and being noticed and being like both hard, but also really can be really empowering. I don't know. I think I've done both. I felt both. So I can.
No, I agree with you. It's also like, selfishly, it's quite handy as well because the amount of calls that I get from conference producers and stuff like that, they go, we've got too many men, we need a woman, and it's annoying because it shouldn't be the last thought when they've already built the panel up already, but it does mean that we do get that voice at the table as well.
I mean, I have been approached, but I mean, it just means that we don't necessarily, like, they invite me to speak because they want a woman that speaks about product, and there's not enough in the room, or speak about the tech, and definitely need more females that are able to speak at that level. And sometimes it just gives you opportunities that otherwise would have either be very costly or just more limited. Yes, it's a bit sad, as I also think, like, you know what, I have a lot of there's a good reason to bring me besides the fact that I'm a woman. And I bring a dog on the stage, but you know what, I'll take what I get.
No, I agree.
The reason, so the next question I like to recently ask is kind of connected also to the program we recently launched about mentorship and the role of mentorship. And I think it came also in the back of some of my earlier conversation across the last year that I've been doing this initiative, is a lot of women have shared that for them, one of the most empowering things was seeing women that were in that role doing the same thing, or mentors were able to teach them or share with them or just even bounce ideas off. So start to ask about the role of mentorship and how mentorship maybe supported you, helped you, if at all.
No, I think mentorship is super important. I actually I guess the flip for me is I get so much from the people that I mentor. So I'd probably say that early on in my career, I had an amazing kind of supportive line management structure. So actually got a lot of that mentorship within the day to day. Whereas now, kind of as I've progressed, I mentor a lot of people throughout our business, and I just get so much from the conversations with them bringing new perspectives that I haven't thought about, with them bringing kind of new ideas to the table. And one of the things that I always kind of discuss with my mentor is like, this is as much about you challenging me as it is me kind of providing you solutions. And I love that. And I think it's definitely kind of stepped on my career, particularly over the last few years, because similar to that first comment about putting myself in other people's shoes, I think that's super important as a leader, no matter what your gender is, to be able to understand what is happening within your total team that you lead, particularly when there's lots of layers within that team. So I get so much from that. I've actually recently been promoted, and part of that, the conversation around that promotion was all around kind of how do you lead, and actually this listening to other people and these levels of mentorship was something that I brought into that interview, and something that was really kind of, you know, a major positive coming out of that, and something that the business really respected.
I really appreciate it. I think that is that mentality of trying to understand why, trying to understand why it's happening, not just give feedback of like, oh, this is bad, which is traditionally how we led, but trying to understand what's happening here. Because if you're trying to actually make things better, just telling someone that they're wrong or this is bad is really actually it has very limited use. If you don't actually understand why is this happening and how do you actually resolve it. This is the symptoms perhaps or something else. And I think that if you start to ask the why, and you can say, I've observed this, but if you come with an accusation from the get-go, obviously the person doesn't necessarily feel like sharing their personal problem. Like, if this comes like an attack, why would someone want to open up? It's just like that, like put yourself in their shoes. Why would you do that? But if you come from a very different perspective of, I've noticed this, is everything all right? Or what's happening? And then give them a platform when they feel heard, you're probably going to get a lot more out of that. Not necessarily saying you can't give negative feedback, but negative feedback is all about also how you give it and like what's the context and stuff. And I think that I completely agree with you in terms of leading a team. A lot of it is understanding the context of what's happening there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as you said, like also understanding people's headspace when you're giving that negative feedback, because we've probably all been in places where stuff is happening outside of work, and then we've been told something in work and it's railroaded us a little bit, and we've not been able to respond in the right way or kind of approach things. So taking that time to just observe and listen and understand what is going on with that person, and you know, it's not about getting involved in everything to do with them, but really understanding how are they feeling at this moment, how, you know, what is going to work best for them is the best way of being. And you know, for me, I'm really passionate that within my team I am someone that is really approachable and creates that really open environment. You know, I share with them about the struggles that I have to make it easier for the team to then share amongst themselves what they're going through.
Or to just make sure that they don't feel as alone. And like at the end of the day, leading by example is one of the biggest ways of doing things. So if you normalize it, because you share your personal life or you're open about what's happening. Like last year I moved a house, and obviously, and I was getting this house, this is where I'm at right now, and I was like running around, and like there was a month where I was really struggling to just juggle. And at some point I know I'm not as 100% as I normally am. I need a minute. And I understand, but I'm sitting on the floor in my new house with hotspot on a bucket of paint. And I know this is not ideal, but this is my reality right now. And I really need you to meet me here for a bit, and I'll get back to where I was before. And just being open and honest, even with my team, like I noticed you need me more, and I need you to understand where I'm at. And I'm sorry, but like, and also for them to be able to then tell me like the same. I know that you need more, but we can't, or this is the best I can do right now, and this will get better. This is just temporary. And that gives a lot of context to like, you know what, let's try to figure it out and see how to get it over it. So I completely agree. For a personal tip, and I think that's really kind of something I found really useful. What would you say that personal tip that you found to be the most empowering or I don't know, helpful tip in your career?
What's the most helpful tip I've ever had in my career?
Yeah.
I think it's to ask the questions. So I remember really early on in my career when kind of I was working for Amazon, and it was a very different business to where it is today. But my manager was like, you've just got to ask. If there's something in the back of your mind, don't sit there thinking, well, everyone else is more senior than me. Of course they know this. There's probably someone else around that table that is thinking exactly the same thing as you. And by you being brave and opening up that door, like that allows other people to also do it. And it's definitely something that I do now. Like I ask a million questions, and I don't care if people may look at me and think, well, why is she asking that? That's a silly question. I really don't care, because actually I know that there are so many quieter people than me, because I'm definitely not quiet, within the room that wouldn't feel comfortable in doing that. So I want to create an environment where, you know, we can get everything out in the open, and everyone can understand where everyone's coming from, and hopefully create that environment where other people also feel that they can put their hands up and go, I don't understand that, or why are we doing that, or what's going on here.
I really like it. I'm also not a quiet person, but mostly like, okay, so I will argue my opinion, and I warn people when they hire me. I will tell you if I think you're wrong. I will eventually do what you want, but I will definitely tell you I think this is a mistake.
Yep, I know the feeling.
How did you feel about it? And like, how did that also help? Because I would feel that this will be also really useful when you're shifting from role to role, because you're brave enough to just ask and teach yourself, and kind of like gather the information you need to kind of switch for, okay, so I don't know this bunch of things, but I'm brave enough to just ask a million questions until I figure all of it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the tips that I give to anyone when they start within the business and I have an introduction with them. They're always like, what should I do? And I'm like, play on the fact you're new, or play on the fact that, you know, you're appealing to someone's ego. That's for me what I do. So if I'm new in a role, I'm like, hi, I'm new, I've got loads of questions, can you help me? Like, you seem really experienced in this area. Or, you know, if it's an area that's maybe something that I've learned about, or if I've changed roles and there's new people in there, you kind of play to that, you know, you're obviously really experienced, what can I do here? Because let's be honest, we're all humans at the end of the day. We love being flattered. And so kind of opening that door to people and saying, I really want to understand more about you, etc. It really helps to build up that rapport and that relationship. And then you find that actually then you open the door in the opposite direction, and people ask you questions, and, you know, will come to you for advice as you kind of move through that. So that's, yeah, I think it's, how do you create the environment? How do you kind of frame it in the right way? And how do you make sure you're building those relationships from the very start?
I think that's very valid. Mine was definitely just like sitting really close to product at some point and just like, Carmelli, help.
Yeah.
We need like a bit of like, please teach me. Because I was quite young at also the time, so it's kind of like, but I still, so I'll say the tip of what helps me get along in Paris. I lived in Paris for half a year. I still, the tip I employ, I look like a lost little girl, kind of apologizing half in French, and like, please help me. And I think that maybe that's kind of appeal to people's sense of like, yes, we need to take care of this wounded bird, and help her along. You know, literally people will come, people say Parisians are not very nice, so people will come to me and say, do you need help? Are you lost? Yes, the help. This was really, so I think there's something really deeply there, where I play it also mostly in my personal life, but I definitely have used it at work as well, where I had to kind of like, okay, yes, I need to learn this. There's no training program. Let me develop my own. And I think that, as you said, the bravery to ask questions and to go figure your own fact. If like someone is not going to hand, I think like nobody's going to hand you your career on a silver platter, or like everything. Like training programs change from company to company. Yeah, I've never worked for a company with a really solid training program, so I don't know. I've mostly developed my own, which then developed the people that will come to replace me. So I guess definitely that power also played a big part of how I grew in my career, so I can really relate. You already mentioned this. So you talked about what you're doing in terms of like trying to, one, be empathetic to the different people in your team and putting yourself in their shoes, and second, asking the questions and kind of giving a platform for them to kind of like understand the context. But what do you think, additional to that maybe, is what is the role that you think women have in the workplace in supporting and empowering other women?
So I don't have children. I have dogs, which are my babies, but they're definitely not many humans. But the thing that I kind of really kind of championed within my team is the fact that even though you are a mother, it doesn't mean that you can't succeed. And, you know, some of the stories that I heard from my team when I've kind of inherited parts along the way was, you know, men have said to them, well, you work part-time because you look after your kids, so you're never going to progress. And trying to break down those barriers that people have and those walls that they've built up and those perceptions of a society that I don't want to create and I don't want to live in, where actually we can't value people because they choose to have a life as well as work. So for me, with the working parents that I have in my team, whether they be female or male, it's about creating that environment where they can come to work and be, you know, who they need to be. But I always say to them, when you log off at 5, like, you then go into another full-time job. And how did they also be their best within that space? And then the other thing for me is actually being the female leader that I wanted to see. And there was a girl who joined my team kind of 6 to 9 months ago, and she kind of said to me, you're the first female that I've worked for that has shown me that I can be a woman and be a leader. I don't have to pretend to be a man to get kind of further on in my career. And that for me is the big thing, like showing up as, you know, as I would want to see a female leader, as I would want to kind of someone that I would want to work for, someone that can balance work and home, someone that can balance kind of the need to be empathetic with the need to kind of set strategic direction and be very direct. And I think for me, that's how I open up the doors for the women in my team is being and making the change that I want to see.
I think that, I mean, that's beautiful in many ways. And like, no, because in the end of the day, as you said, the reset, as I've heard a million times, the end of the, like, it's all about being the person you want to see and all about providing that and showing people it's possible and it's a reality and it's not something that's, it's not an impossibility. And if you can do that, that is such a big step already, to show people what good looks like and to show people what that is possible. And I think that even just normalizing crying at work or normalizing just doing regular things. I'm sorry, just for me, it's a big, like, see if one of my team members feel like crying, for me, that's one way of processing feelings. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean that, oh, if someone's getting mad or showing a different side of emotion, those are all normal, but female way of processing emotions is not normalized.
Yeah.
If we start normalizing different reactions, and it's not just male reactions that are normalized in a workplace, then there's a lot more inclusivity there already, because we don't always feel wrong.
Yeah. You know, crying is sometimes a great outlet, right? It's a great outlet for that emotion that you don't know how to express in words, and can actually tell you a lot about how people are feeling and the frustrations that, you know, maybe they haven't been able to articulate, right? So it is important that people can show how they're feeling in any way that feels comfortable and authentic to them.
I mean, sometimes also, like, you have a lot going on in your personal life. I had a meeting that, you know what, we're supposed to do one-on-one, but they had a horror, like, I don't know, something like really bad happened. And instead of that, we just talked. Because that's the best I can offer them right now, and they need someone to listen, and really that's the best I can give. And trying to force back what it's supposed to be is just not helpful. So, like, understanding, I don't know, like, I think it's, how do you win?
Mm.
And if you start really thinking like really goal-oriented, is how do I win? Sometimes the shortest route is not the most direct route, because sometimes you need to go around something to really achieve something in the fastest way possible. And we have all of these notions in our mind that this is the only way, and we're gonna bulldozer our way through the wall. And sometimes, it's easier to just walk around it.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah.
But yeah. Final question. I think that's also kind of a fun question, and maybe you've already answered it. But what is the most crucial leadership lesson that you've learned?
To listen and be comfortable with silence. So I think, active listening is something that I don't think any of us are particularly good at, actually listening to what the person is saying, and then just sitting there and being really comfortable with the silence that comes after it, because some of the most valuable conversations or kind of ways that we've been able to move forward with people in my team and wider stakeholders is just kind of giving that space, where actually then they fill it with everything they really wanted to say. And I think that is super, super important. I'm an only child, so I'm very comfortable with silence. A lot of people find it very, very awkward. But yeah, that's definitely the most valuable lesson.
I think I'll need to adopt it a bit more in my life.
It's amazing. If you just sit there after someone's finished talking, just sit there, count to 10. No one will let that 10 seconds be unfilled. Most people won't anyway. So that you then get actually what is the true stuff that they were trying to mask in that first answer, when they were kind of telling you what they thought you wanted to hear. It's very, very powerful.
I will try my hardest to practice silence. And I will, I've heard about it a lot. Of course, I come from most of society where people speak on top of each other. So it takes a while to try to untangle that.
Absolutely. Yeah. When culturally it doesn't necessarily fit with what you've been brought up with, it's probably a bit more difficult, I imagine.
So there is a journey there to try, because the only way I grew up in a situation, the only way to speak, if you want to have any voice, kind of to fight for it. Like, so you're not giving, here's a stage. You have to go get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think this is a really good exercise. I'm going to give myself a goal.
Yeah. And just think, that's what your dogs do, right? I know we've both got dogs. Dogs just look at you. So when you speak to them, they will then just continue looking at you, and then you'll probably continue outpouring everything. So yeah, I think dogs are a great example for many things in life.
That is very true. Though I can say from a husky perspective, sometimes they do talk back. I can't say that this is that's your feeling, but this one is still asleep, like a ginormous cat. Thank you so much for joining me today. For the full episode, please go to our platform womenliftingwomen.io, if I'm not mistaken. And I really appreciate your time. This has been such a pleasure, and it was like a really good lessons to take home, I guess. For me at least, I've already made one life decisions here.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you for your time today, too.